There was a major step forward in the road out of lockdown in New South Wales today, with plans announced to free up Sydney hotels from quarantine duties and trial home-based quarantine soon. Now, I must say, it's odd to me that New South Wales has to trial this program, given the fact that South Australia has had a trial for home quarantine underway for weeks now and is expanding it next week. But let's find out how this works. The New South Wales Tourism Minister is Stuart Ayres. Minister, thank you very much for your time.
Good evening, Chris.
So what will home quarantine entail, and what will qualify someone to be able to go home and quarantine?
Well, Chris, we're starting with a small trial here in New South Wales that will kick off at the end of this month or very early next month. There'll be 175 people. 50 of those will come from Qantas aircrew that we're already working with around home quarantine. They're flying into the country and then back out again in relatively short turnaround times, 3 or 4 days in some cases. So they're a good group of people for us to test the technology. The other 125 will come from people who are returning to Australia or coming to Australia from overseas, and that will allow us to select people to fit a profile for the trial. So the conditions around home quarantine will vary from a person in their home or a house versus an apartment, the age, the type of conditions that they're operating in, whether their family's with them or not. So we want to test all of those different conditions. We also want to be able to test the technology. It's the same technology that's been utilised in South Australia for their trial, which includes facial recognition and location-based services. And this will be overseen by New South Wales Police and New South Wales Health. They'll be randomly selected in the sense that they're coming from the people that are already coming back to Australia, but we do want to make sure that we get the right mix of people to test those different conditions.
So the app that they'll have, as is in the case of South Australia, will be an app that you can track them with, making sure that they follow their obligations, as opposed to an anklet or something that a prisoner might use on parole, right?
That's correct. We're not doing wearable devices here. This is an application that allows facial recognition, a bit like the Face ID check to open your phone.
Right.
And then the location-based services as well allow us to identify where a person is. They'll have to check in multiple times a day, and that'll be monitored by New South Wales Police and New South Wales Health. And that also gives us a chance to interact and engage with them, a bit similar to what we've done with people who have been in isolation or quarantine here already, where they get a daily text message, they have to fill out a survey, they let us know if they're exhibiting any symptoms, whether they've got access to medication, or if there's anything we need to help them with.
And they've got to be double vaccinated, and when they get to the airport, they get a quick, fast antigen test to work out whether they're positive. Is that how it works?
Yeah, so to start with, Chris, where only people fully vaccinated will be included in the trial. We're going to run this as a small trial so we can learn the lessons on what we need to scale up. I think increasingly we're recognising that hotel quarantine is not really fit for purpose. We've got the virus moving through our community. We do need to transition away from hotel quarantine being the mainstay of the interactions that happen between people coming from overseas and re-engaging back in the Australian community. This is a big step in that direction. We just want to make sure we've got the right technology that allows us to do it safely.
And just quickly, do you need a trial? Given the fact that South Australia has done so much of this, could you not just sit in on their trial and work out exactly how to do it?
Well, it's effectively what we're doing. We're just operationalising it in New South Wales. We don't want to rely on the South Australian health system or the South Australian police force. They're pretty busy with what they're doing. We've obviously got larger numbers of people to deal with here in New South Wales. So this is very much about making sure that police and health can operationalise this. I think there's a real prospect that we can move rapidly from trial to a larger scale of home-based quarantine. And then ultimately there'll be a national conversation, which is laid out pretty clearly in the national plan. We're in phase A now, so we're doing trials. We move to phase B, where we're looking at home-based quarantine. And as we move through those phases that have been outlined by the National Cabinet, ultimately we'll be in a position where for fully vaccinated people, we won't be using hotels for quarantine.
Stuart Ayres, thank you so much for your time. Enjoy your weekend.
Not a problem. You too, Chris.
All right, New South Wales Tourism Minister. It just goes to show you those best, bright ideas from Queensland and Victoria about boutique quarantine facilities are just redundant, totally redundant.